Another board member is going to be our moderator this evening. Thank you, Paul. So welcome and thank you for attending. My name is Robin Murphy, and I am a proud board member of Washington Council of Lawyers, which is DC's voluntary public interest bar association. We welcome you to join as a member and check out our website, which will be in the chat, to find out more about all the many activities we do in the DC community, and also how to join as a member. In response to the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, the Washington Council of Lawyers board, several of us board members, began an annual series on racial justice to provide our members and the larger DC community that we serve with perspectives on how racism continues to perpetuate systemic and institutional discrimination against people of color. And most importantly, what we as attorneys, advocates, and fellow human beings can do to protect and advance civil rights for all. The series, we present programs exploring implicit bias, explicit bias, racism, the multiple ways bias and racism perpetuate discrimination in systems just such as the judicial branch and educational institutions. Our programs explore what we can do as attorneys and advocates and fellow human beings to protect and advance anti-racism and civil rights for all. I'm very grateful to the Law Firm Antiracism Alliance tonight, because their values so closely and goals so closely align with our own. So I hope you will really enjoy this presentation and find it very informative. Thank you for attending. And now take it away, Paul.
All right. Thank you so much, Robin. I'm just really excited to be a part of this racial justice series. You heard from Robin that this has been 10 years in the making, and it's not a flash in the pan series. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so I'm really excited to see that it's still happening and that our series is ongoing. And similarly, the Law Firm Antiracism Alliance began at an inflection point in history, which we'll hear more about shortly. But we know that that work still continues, that there's decades and centuries of injustice in our country, and that it's going to take more than a few years to overcome that. And so we've rolled up our sleeves, we're doing the work, and you're going to hear a lot about that today. So thank you to the Washington Council of Lawyers for giving us this space to inform folks about what we're doing. So we have a really wonderful panel here tonight. With me today is Kitty Wach, the pro bono counsel for Miller and Chevalier, and Ted Howard, the pro bono partner at Wiley, Rein. Kitty and Ted both serve on the LFAA board with me and many others, and have been there pretty much since the beginning of the organization. A newer addition to LFAA is Guerby Noel, who is our first full-time staff member, and he's the operations manager at LFAA. And we're very excited to have Guerby on board to help us advance our mission and implement all the things that we've been working on. And so I'd like to start off by hearing more about the history of LFAA and explaining how we came into being, and a little bit more about our mission and the pillars that shape our organization. So I'm going to turn it over to Ted to help us guide us through that.
Thanks, Paul, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Paul mentioned, LFAA started at a significant inflection point in the immediate aftermath of the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020. And it really started as a result of spontaneous phone conversations between 8 or 10 full-time pro bono professionals at law firms who just wanted to share thoughts with one another and share concerns, talk about experiences and feelings in the aftermath of that terrible event. And it took shape pretty rapidly, actually. I think after about the third night of a lengthy phone conversation among a group of us, our current president, Brenna Devaney, who was the pro bono counsel at Skadden, stayed up all night drafting what became our charter, and shared it with us the next morning, and we started marking it up, and before long we had something that we thought was workable. There were really some critical guiding principles that I think emerged pretty quickly in our discussions, and I'd like to just talk quickly about those. One was that, as pro bono professionals and firms that do a lot of pro bono work on behalf of individuals and communities of color, I think there was an argument that could be made, certainly, that we were already doing racial justice work. But the critical thing was that we all felt that we needed to do more. Not in lieu of, but in addition to the work that we were already engaged in. We felt like we needed to be an add-on, a force multiplier, rather than a diversion from anything that we were already involved in. And that was very critical, and we wanted to be very intentional about that. I think we all recognize that to the extent that we were going to try to focus on a movement of towards greater racial justice as a result of law firm pro bono work, that we were latecomers to this particular area, and that we needed to proceed with humility, and that we needed to take guidance from and be led by the civil rights organizations and legal services providers that were already immersed in this work long before our epiphany. I think we also recognized that it was going to be very important for us to operate leanly, so as not to serve as any kind of diversion in terms of financial resources from the legal services providers and civil rights organizations that we had worked with in the past, and that we supported financially as well as through our pro bono resources. We knew that we needed to acknowledge and recognize the significance of the fact that large private law firms are hardly the standard bearers in terms of racial justice within their own four walls, and that at the same time as we intended to really focus externally on doing more work in an intentional way to combat racism, that we also needed to be equally committed to getting our own houses in order in terms of equality and justice within our own ranks. And lastly, I think we recognize that, as Paul noted, this is not a 1 year, a 5 year, a 10-year enterprise. And so part of the commitment that we've asked Law Firm Alliance members to make is recognition that this is going to be a long-term commitment. So with all of that, we have embarked on something of a great adventure, and 4 years later, I think, or 4 years into it, I think all of us are encouraged and pleasantly surprised by the fact that we are doing what we're doing. And I'm going to turn it over to Kitty, I think, to talk about a little bit of that.
Thanks, Ted. And before we move to Kitty, I just want to, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but if folks have questions along the way, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to address them. We'll also leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. And Ted, something just kind of rang out that you were just describing as you were talking about LFAA's origins, was just that energy and enthusiasm and passion and anger to do this work, in 2020, 2021, 2022. And so to be able to channel that energy into something productive, into something efficient, and to have a structure to do that, I think was one of the big driving factors of why LFAA came into existence. And there's still that energy there. And I think, we're in a very tumultuous time in history. And so we may see that coming more, in the coming years. But that is definitely part of our mission ongoing. And so as we go into that, I do want to circle back just for a second on the pillars of the organization. If I could just turn to Guerby to introduce us through the pillars, I think will guide us through the rest of the conversation as well, so you can see the rest of our structure. So Guerby, I'll turn it over to you for a second.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I just want to ensure that everyone can hear me. Can I get a thumbs up if everyone can?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So as Ted pointed out, we embarked on this very long journey, not a 1 year, 5 year, 10-year journey. Wanted to ensure that we were taking on this gargantuan task with a proper structure in place. And so we gave a lot of thought as to how we would approach this very tall task and how we would go about not being duplicative in the services that we're providing, as well as ensuring that we're reaching all of our partners. And so the work of the organization is really centered around 3 pillars that you see listed here today. So the first are convenings and trainings, which are an opportunity for all of the members as well as our public interest partners to come together and fellowship and learn about the relevant issues that are coming up in the racial justice space. It's an opportunity for the alliance firms to learn from our public interest partners as well, and certainly using it as an opportunity to connect, which brings us to our next section, which is to connect and increase pro bono resources. So one of the things that we wanted to ensure is that, we're not just an organization that doesn't have a mission, doesn't have any work product that comes out of it. We really want to ensure that we're providing our partners with an opportunity to have their projects taken on, as well as having alliance firms have an opportunity to take on this very timely work. And so we're in the business of ensuring that there are always pro bono opportunities that are available. And very much so speaks to what Ted was saying earlier, is that this isn't an issue that's going to go away very, very quickly. There's always something to do. There's always something to be done. So we want to ensure that we're providing those resources both to our alliance firm members as well as to our public interest partners. And then lastly, we have our research and analyze systemic racism in the law. A large part of what we're doing is this is an area of law that really requires a proper education as far as the issues that come up that change from day to day, that change from year to year. And the reality is, if we're embarking and wanting to get into these spaces, it's really incumbent upon us to ensure that we're properly educated about the issues. And so part of what we're embarking on as a journey is to ensure that all of our alliance firm members, as well as just the legal community as a whole, has access to training materials and written work product that talks about these systemic issues. You'll hear a bit more about this later when we talk a bit about the library, which houses our work products, as well as some other matters that we've worked on with our public interest partners. And then lastly, granted, this isn't necessarily a pillar, we like to think of this as almost like the foundation of our organization, in that a lot of this wouldn't be possible without us building the sustainable community that we have, which isn't just composed of the alliance firms, but also we found that it's composed of our public interest partners and you'll hear sort of all the different stories and different examples of how the two have come together to bring about great change and do great work within this space. And so the reality is those 3 pillars, while very important, wouldn't be able to stand without the strong basis of our great community that we have. And so with that, I'll pause and I'll hand it over to you, Kitty.
Thank you, Guerby. I want to underscore what both Ted and Guerby have said, that when we started this project, we had our eyes open. All of us were long-term members of the Law Firm Pro Bono Committee, and we did not want to start another legal services organization that would take up space in a group that was already in a field that's already saturated with lots of well-meaning organizations, by no means meeting all the needs, but there's lots of organizations already out there. So we began in the beginning with convening, and convening was from the very beginning sort of our MO. we feel that's a foundational way to address this complex and sort of multi-tentacled problem in our society that's been going on for centuries and reaches into literally every corner of our culture. If we want to dismantle racism, we have to do it intentionally and carefully. And that means doing a lot of listening and a lot of calling together experts. One of the very first things we did was convene a series of roundtable meetings throughout the entire country. We did them geographically, where we invited the legal services organizations that were operating in that jurisdiction, in that geographic area, to come together with us, and we would explain what we were doing and ask them what they were, how they saw their own work in terms of the racial justice lens that we were seeking to apply. We were, of course, met with very well-deserved skepticism in the beginning, but these were wonderful meetings, not only because they taught us a lot about what was needed and what we could do, what we could be helpful at, but also because it allowed, for instance, in the DC area, in the New York area, or other geographic areas, people to come together who had been working in the trenches for decades, but had not necessarily talked to each other, and also had not, you remember, this was in the early days of the few months after George Floyd's murder. People hadn't necessarily been applying intentionally a racial justice lens to their work. We had very interesting discussions about anti-poverty versus anti-racism work and other things that really informed where we went after that. So I would say those roundtable meetings were the beginning of our convening. We and our convenings are not, they're not like pep rallies where we just kind of like recommit ourselves to this cause and we indulge in a sense of outrage. They're more like, they're very serious discussions where we look at how complicated this issue is. And we brought in a lot of experts. We have, I guess, our main convenings are our annual summits. We've had 5 of them and we're only 4 years old, so they're not exactly annual, but they're mainly annual. And we've had wonderful speakers who've met with us. We started off, one of the early ones, we had Nicole Hannah-Jones, who had created the 1619 Project. And we've had Jeffrey Robinson of the Who We Are Project, and then we had Stacey Abrams. So the summits, I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to participate in them. They're multi-day events. They're usually in the beginning of December and they're 3 or 4 days. And they're of course entirely free and they're on Zoom. And we just have a variety of different speakers. We've had some wonderful historians who really inform us about the historic basis of the racist structure of our society. So these have been, I think, really advancing the discussion. In addition, there's 2 other convenings I want to talk about besides our summit, and both of them just took place this past summer. One was a one-time event, and this is our only in-person event that we've ever held. This was on June 10th. We had an all-day education summit to discuss the fallout or the reaction to the Supreme Court's decision in the SFA versus Harvard case. We called together lawyers from the Alliance law firms, but also government lawyers, people who work for the Department of Education. We had speakers from the EEOC. The event was co-sponsored with the National Lawyers Committee, and the task that we had set ourselves was to figure out how can race-conscious decision-making continue in a legal format following the Supreme Court's decision. It was a fascinating day. All kinds of speakers added to our knowledge. And we ended the day breaking up into small groups where we actually workshopped ways that we could continue to meet the goals of the DEI movement, but stay within the law. It was a really useful and very inspiring meeting. And as I said, our first and only so far in-person gathering, but I think we'll do others in the future. The other thing I wanted to highlight before we move on to other parts of the LFAA is we have an ongoing reparations speaker series. This is something that the idea of reparations was not really on our mind when we first started LFAA, unless Ted or Paul remembers differently. I don't think that's something that we were focused on in the beginning, but it really came out organically. The more deeply we got into this issue, the more clearly we saw reparations as something that has to be addressed. So we developed a speaker series, and we've had some wonderful speakers. We had most recently, well, at the end of June, we had Ta-Nehisi Coates come and speak. It was the 10-year anniversary of a foundational essay he wrote for the Atlantic magazine. And it was really fascinating to hear him talk about 10 years on, when the idea was so new when he first approached it, and how it's seen now. And then just last week, I think, or no, just not very long ago, maybe it was last week, we had a book discussion by these two professors who both teach at Yale, and they've written a book together called 15 Cents on the Dollar, which really took an economic view on the racial divide in our country, both in terms of income gap and asset gap. It was actually fascinating, and I encourage everyone to read the book if they can. It's called 15 Cents on the Dollar, and the authors are Louise Story and Ebony Reed. So that's the kind of enriching, really inspiring events that we think are essential for us to meet the goals we want to meet, because we really are looking for deep and lasting change.
Thank you so much.
I'm not sure who's going next, Paul.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful to hear about all the different types of convening that the LFAA is doing. I think it's, I see a lot of public interest about a lot of legal services folks on the call. And I think in your world, I think it's pretty common to come together and discuss issues of racial justice and discuss topics like reparations. Maybe not. Maybe it's not as common as I think it is, but certainly in the law firm world, it's less common. And so to have a platform to actually even say the word reparations within a law firm context is, I think at the time, somewhat groundbreaking, and now it's becoming less so, thankfully. And so to be able to have these spaces to bring people together from the private sector to talk about very difficult issues is important. The convenings have really been a place for people to rally together. And so, Kitty says it's not a pep rally. It's certainly not only a pep rally, but it does serve that component as well, to identify people within law firms. Sometimes there aren't that many who are able to step up and say, I want to be a part of this work. I want to be a part of this fight, and to find other people who are like-minded who can join and build off of each other in that energy. And then with the roundtable discussions that Kitty mentioned at the beginning, that is one of the main ways that we had connected with legal services organizations in the beginning of our organization. And as Kitty mentioned, we did that sort of geographically. It was all virtual, so it was all Zoom geographically. But we were able to hear from a lot of different, I think it was over 400 organizations that participated in those roundtables. This was 4 years ago now. And so we are hoping to restart that process again and do roundtable discussions again, this time focusing more on subject matter jurisdiction rather than geography. So bringing together organizations that are doing housing justice across the country, or maybe voting rights, and bringing them together to talk about issues that are impacting them, nationwide. Maybe these groups are already speaking to each other and that there's a great dialogue already happening. But if there's something that we learned from our first roundtables, is that not everyone's talking to everybody. And there are always organizations, particularly in corners of our country, where there are less resources, maybe less private sector firms to help out, who really benefited from kind of joining the fold. And so we're hoping to start that process again in the coming months. And so we may look to you to help us guide us as to how we should frame that discussion, how we should bring together, who we should invite, all of that. We're really excited to get started on that process once again soon. So that was a look at our convenings. I want to turn it over now to Guerby to walk us through the structure of how firms join this alliance and how they get involved in our work through our working groups, really the meat and potatoes of what LFA is doing. So Guerby, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Paul. Just before I move on to the working groups, I think one of the things that needs to be underscored is the summit. I think it's sort of like our zenith event at the end of the year, where, given much thought as to the theme to it, the sessions that we have, as well as the speakers that we invite, And it's not just an opportunity for the Alliance firm members to learn, but it also we invite our public interest partners. So to the extent if any of you have not been or have not been invited, we'd welcome you to reach out to me after so that we can add you to the invite list to ensure that you get that invitation at the end of the year. And
Guerby, can
it's
I
a
jump in?
well-attended event. Oh, sure.
Sorry, I meant you reminded me that I meant to say that on our website, there is a page that describes the summits we've had so far and all the speakers. And I encourage if anyone's interested to go look at that because it has details about what we've covered at each of the 5 summits we've had so far.
Oh, thank you for that, Kitty. And just also want to underscore that it's also a very well-attended event. We've averaged about 600 attendees. We're hoping to build upon that each and every year. As it was mentioned, we had Stacey Abrams last year, which was obviously the marquee speaker, and we're hoping to repeat that draw again with this year's summit. And so moving on, as Paul teed up very nicely to talk a bit about the LFAA working groups, which he described as the meat and potatoes of the organization, which I think rightfully so. And so as an organization, we're made up of about 300 plus law firms, which are spread very specifically throughout the 50 states. This is just meant to ensure that we're always poised and at the ready to address any pro bono matters that present itself. I think the reality is that, you know, if we tout ourselves as a national organization, we want to ensure that we have the necessary resources to address any of the matters that do come up. And so with our working groups, which act as the lifeblood of the organization, it serves as an opportunity for our members to volunteer in small groups, which are separated by subject matter. Now we have 18 working groups within the organization, and the topics range from access to justice all the way up to voting rights. Now all of these areas of law are ones that obviously we know that there are systemic issues and barriers that exist within each of them. And so our Alliance members are kept very busy with identifying and learning how to address some of the issues that present themselves. And so within these organizations, it's like lots of opportunities to get involved. So I mean, as far as an Alliance firm member is concerned, if they want to get involved with a working group, I mean, the reality is you can sign up on our website, and we'll discuss the website a bit further on in the presentation, where you can sign up and how you can contact me to do so. Within these working groups, you can be a member where you essentially would attend and contribute to the work that's being done. There are also leadership opportunities, not just for attorneys, but as well for your professional staff as well, to act as co-chairs, chairs of a subcommittee, also acting as a coordinator to ensure that the work is being done in and executed in a timely manner. Now, all of these working groups, they meet on a regular basis of their choosing, where they'll discuss the relevant issues within their subject areas. These working groups also use their meetings as an opportunity to hear from their public interest partners and have their members learn from their partners. So in some instances, we've had some examples in the past. We've had the Tennessee Justice Center come out and speak about some of the reproductive justice issues that they're dealing with within their state, some of the Medicaid issues that they're dealing with. Our working groups also, it's a breeding ground for our projects that we list on our bulletin board. And so the working groups are meant to essentially make the organization, but on a micro level, where we're ensuring that the work that's being done isn't duplicative, but it's really being led by the public interest partners. So with each working group, there's a partner or partners that they've aligned themselves with that'll inform some of the issues that they'll be looking into, that they'll be addressing, and that they'll be working towards with their any projects or any written work product. The list you see here doesn't necessarily mean that these are the only subject matters. These are the 18 that we came up with in the beginning. Certainly, there may be some holes, and if you do identify an issue that you believe we should be addressing, we are certainly more than open and welcoming to hearing those suggestions and taking them under advisement. So Now, moving on to the website. Here we
Guerby,
go.
before we
Oh,
move on to
yes,
that, I just wanted to,
sure.
you could go back to the working group slide. I just wanted to point out that these have evolved a little bit since the beginning of LFAA, and there are very intentional evolutions here. For example, the family regulation group, I think, was called something else previously. It was like family law or something. And I think the more we dug into that topic, we realized that it's not just about the law, it's about the way that families are regulated by the law. And so we wanted to kind of emphasize the injustices that come through the existing family court structures in many states. And so that was just one example. For another example is the reproductive justice group. I think it's always had that title, but I know that group is very intentional in drawing a distinction between reproductive rights and reproductive justice, and really looking at how inequity impacts access to reproductive rights, and that is the main focus of that group. There are also some groups there that I think you might be surprised to see. The fact that we have a philanthropy group looking at how money and contributions are distributed across the country, and particularly how they impact grassroots racial justice organizations, and looking at it from the private sector perspective, which is where all of our alliance firms are. I think that's a very important viewpoint to have, and try to improve the way that contributions are made to organizations that are doing this work on the ground. As well as, I'll just mention the tax group, the tax system group. Not a topic that you would think of immediately when you think of racial injustice, but it doesn't take long to figure out that the tax system can create a lot of inequities in our country. And so looking at how tax lawyers can make a difference, and how to diversify that profession and have more access to the tax code, I think is definitely within our mission. And so that's where a lot of these groups have come from. They're all volunteer driven and led. And so we have many wonderful LFAA leaders who are running these groups and really helping drive the vision for them. And so if it's something that you're interested in, if you're at an alliance firm, you can definitely get involved with any of these organizations, any of these working groups. So Guerby, I'll turn it back to you. Sorry about
Guerby, since you've already been interrupted, can I continue?
that.
I echo everything Paul said. The Family Regulation Working Group was formerly, I believe, called the Child Welfare Working Group. And just as Paul described, an evolution in thinking occurred, and family regulation appeared to be the better name for that working group. And I want to just echo the tax system group. Because I come from a tax firm, many of our lawyers are involved in the tax working group, and they do really interesting and really important things.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you, Paul. I will add, just as a feedback to what I said before, this is led by our public interest partner. Change in the organization, that was the suggestion of our public interest partners. The name of our reproductive justice working group, it certainly was kept as is after that, for continuing on with the theme of ensuring that the work that we're doing is really led by and in consultation with public interest partners. Extends not just to the substantive nature of the work, but also to the naming of groups as well. And so to move on to speak a bit about the website. So that web address is Law Firm Antiracism Alliance.org. And so just a sort of a brief breakdown of it. We have an external facing portion of the website, as well as an internal portion of the website. And so on the external portion of the website, you'll see sort of your general information about the organization that once again echoes some of what you've heard already from Ted, Paul, and Katie so far within the presentation, where it gives you the rundown about the organization, about our mission, a bit about our history. It speaks a bit about our convenings. On the Alliance Firms tab that you see here as well, you'll see a full listing actually of our 300 firms. And so give an idea of how large it is. And in addition, we do have our LFA leadership highlighted not just our board members, but also our advisory council, which are some general partners, general counsel, as well as other organizations such as Thomson Reuters, partners to the organization who one allowed us to this website some of the resources I'll speak about in a bit. And then the third tab, I'm sorry, that you see here is the convenes that we have within the organization. So Kitty provided you with a base summary of some of the convenings, but if you go there, you'll be able to get a listing of the dates for the convenings that we've had, as well as a brief rundown of our thinking behind it and the history of it, so to speak. And then lastly, you'll see here working groups. And so what I showed you previously that listed out the 18 working groups is essentially what you would see with the landing page. However, in addition to the list, once you clicked on each name of the working groups, you would get a brief description of their mission. And so if you visit these, and we more than welcome you to do so, you'll get a better understanding of what we do as an organization. And certainly we could be here for about 2-3 hours talking about everything within the organization, but wanted to just provide you a bit of what we do. Now, this portion will be of great interest to a lot in attendance. New projects that are on our website. Now, this is a link that we have on our website that serves as an opportunity for our public interest partners to submit any projects that they believe aligns with our mission. It is also one that's right for our LFAA members to assist with. And so that's been used many times over to submit projects. Some of the examples that have come through there, we've had individuals reach out for research on the funding for capital defense in Louisiana. That's one project that was submitted recently that we were able to place within, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks. We've had organizations reach out who are seeking co-counsel for complaints that they're filing regarding the delays within their state's Medicaid system that we're working on placing as well. We've also received requests to assist with providing research on legislative bills and some of the arguments that would be made against it to ensure that the public interest partners are properly prepared to address some of the backlash that they've received. And so really, once again, like I pointed out, I think this would be of great interest to our public interest partners who are here today, who may have not known about our organization or who don't necessarily have a contact at the organization. You can utilize this resource as an opportunity to submit a project for our consideration. I will also add, if you do have a project, you do have a contact, I'm sorry, you can simply reach out to them directly. I'm the one who will be able to offer myself as that contact, and I'll provide my email address at the end of my portion. I'll also be in the follow-up email as well. And so there are also 2 resources that will be on those, particularly new resources and collaboration of organization.
Guerby, we're losing your audio a little bit.
And Thomson Reuters.
So
can you hear me?
Yeah, it's kind of going in and out a little bit. I'm happy to kind of do that the last 2 portions.
I'm sorry.
No problems. But I just want to, first of all, thank you for walking us through the website, because there's so much on there. And there is, the bulletin board, as Guerby mentioned, is the main portal to submit projects. So if you're working on work where you feel like you would benefit from having the muscle of 300 law firms available to volunteer on projects, please look there and submit your projects. Those bulletin board projects are checked periodically. We send them out to all the alliance firms, and people just take them off the list like a regular bulletin board. And so we've matched a lot of pro bono collaborations that way. One thing I'm particularly proud of is that we've been able to introduce new organizations to new firms. That's really the goal of LFAA, is to expand capacity. And so, we recognize that legal services, many of you have many great existing pro bono relationships, which continue working with them, absolutely. But there are a lot of firms out there that you may not know. And so I think it's helpful to have a tool like the bulletin board to connect with those firms. We've also recognized that we've worked with organizations, as I mentioned earlier, in places where they may not have a lot of legal resources, and particularly large law firm resources. And so we've been able to start projects in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Oklahoma, places where it's needed the most, frankly. And so we are able to connect firms in DC, New York, LA, with these organizations, and really take our work to where the problems are. And so I'm excited about that. And then I think where Guerby was going, I'm happy to just mention this while I'm talking, were two new resources that we've added to the website recently. One is our language access principles. This is an area where we've, again, as you've kind of heard, we've been learning as we're going along. And one area that we learned quite a lot about was the topic of language justice. And the ability for people of limited English proficiency and people who are hard of hearing to be able to communicate effectively within the legal system. And we recognize that that also applies to pro bono matters. And so when the private sector is taking on pro bono work, are we consciously thinking about the language that our clients are most comfortable speaking in, and whether they have the resources to do that? And I think there was a wide range of what firms are doing on that front. And so we wanted to help provide more resources for that, so that everyone can learn about what are kind of best practices in working with interpreters, where are places that you can access interpreters, what are our legal services colleagues doing that we can learn from, that are really excellent practices to borrow. And things that we can apply for our clients to make them, understand that we are working with them in the language that is most comfortable to them, and also within our own firms, looking at resources within our own firms and not overtaxing people of color, people who speak different languages, to make sure that they are being respected and, frankly, appreciated, compensated even for the work that they're doing, that we sometimes just ask them to do because they happen to speak a different language. So lots going on there. I really encourage you to check that out. The second resource that we recently added is our Cultural Awareness Resource Exchange, or CARE. And this is an exchange for training materials for work. If you're wanting to get involved in racial justice work and you want to learn up before you do this, I think we all recognize that as we were getting involved in this work, that it really helps to have an understanding of history, of anthropology, of psychology. There's so many different fields out there that the legal sector can learn from. And there's so many materials out there that we can learn from as well. And so we started compiling a lot of resources that you can read through, some topics on implicit bias, on language justice, as I just mentioned, lots of trainings, PDFs, videos, even links to live resources, in-person resources as well. So if you are doing this work and you yourself, or maybe the team that you work with, or the volunteers that you're recruiting, would benefit from having some training to get involved, we encourage you to look there. There's a lot of good stuff there, and we're always taking more resources as well. So if you have some great resources that you utilize within your own organization, please send them to us. There's a link there that Guerby put in the chat that you can actually submit materials to that exchange. And so it's open access. Anyone can go in. There's no password required. So please feel free to utilize that resource there. And so the last topic that I wanted to mention was just our other collaborations with legal services organizations. I think the theme that you've heard throughout this evening was that we're really taking our cue from the public interest sector. And so a lot of the work that we do through our working groups comes through our legal services partners. A lot of the convening topics have come from our legal services partners. And so two other things that we've done recently, one is our summer associate project base. And so we are, every summer we have an influx of law students that come to law firms and are looking to do pro bono work. Not just pro bono work, but we encourage them to do pro bono work. And so when they come to law firms, I will say that, you know, certainly as of late and really since 2020, law students are coming to law firms with an expectation to do racial justice work. This is something that probably didn't exist as much in previous decades. But in the last 5 years, for sure, law students know they have, some of them have gone to law school, you know, in the aftermath of what happened in 2020. And so we are incorporating a lot of that work into our summer associate programs. And one way to do that is through the LFAA Summer Project Exchange, where legal services organizations can submit projects that are designed for law students, and they're primarily research projects. And the way I describe them are they're those back burner projects that you are working on that you wish you had like 10 more people to do to research. Law students are great for that, and summer associates are great for that as well. And so we just are wrapping up that process now as we reach the end of the summer. But we placed, I think, over 40 assignments with different firms across the country, assisting many different legal services organizations to look into those projects. I see Patrice Sultan from the DC Justice Lab here. The DC Justice Lab was one of those organizations that submitted projects, and we worked together, my firm included, to help reorganize and update their resources that they have on pages that are benefiting the DC public, as well as many others who are working in the criminal justice space to understand topics ranging from implicit bias, jury selection, to DUI laws. There's just so many different topics on their website that just needed some tweaking, some fine tuning, and it's the perfect project for law students to do. And so that I encourage folks to take a look at that. If you're at an alliance firm and you didn't participate this year, next summer, definitely think about that. There are a lot of projects you can jump on, and they're really wonderful. They really are spanning just the course of a summer. So you can get them done in about 10 weeks. And they really benefit the organizations that are receiving the final product. And that takes me to the last resource that we have is our library. Guerby had mentioned this earlier in our presentation. The library is where all of those research projects go to live. And not just from the summer associates, but any of the work that we've done with our bulletin board and any other pro bono projects that we placed, they all create this body of work that is research based on a variety of racial justice topics that I guarantee you are impacting more than just one organization out there. They're impacting many communities out there that are facing the same issues. And so we realized that we were getting a lot of requests for the same topic over and over again. And that was leading to a lot of inefficiency. And so we recognize that maybe we can compile all these resources into one place, make it open access so that people can see what other organizations are researching and benefit from the fruits of the labor. And so that's what the library is. It's a part of the website. You can go on there, you can see little prospecti of different subjects and learn a little bit about each topic. And if there's something that you say, wait, that's really interesting. That's something that I'm working on. That's something that's bothering me. Maybe not exactly the way it does in that jurisdiction, but I can definitely learn a lot from it. I can apply some of those principles to what I'm going through. Take a look. We can then send you the entire article, the entire research product memo, whatever it is, and you can use it as you wish for your own advocacy purposes. And so there's a lot on there. I think we're over 100 articles at this point, 100 items, and it keeps growing. And so we encourage you as well, if you have research material that you think would be beneficial to other organizations, this is a great place to deposit it. Obviously, there's no confidential information within those memos. We take out any kind of client identifying information, but it is really there to be a tool to bring our community together and share resources with each other. So please check it out. Okay, that was a whole lot of discussion of all the resources that LFAA has. It makes me excited to know that we're doing a lot. But I also want to leave a little bit of space to hear about a project that we recently went through between a firm and a legal services organization, just to give you an example of what this work looks like. And so Ted's firm, Wiley Rein, was working with Robin's previous organization, Disability Rights Maryland, on a project. And I'd love to hear from Ted about how that project went and how you guys connected with each other.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. And I'll try to keep this quick. we were approached during the pandemic by Disability Rights Maryland through a common contact. They were getting reports from all over the state of Maryland, but in particular in Prince George's County, about concerns with respect to disproportionate discipline being imposed on children with disabilities. And of course, in Prince George's County, given its demographic, the vast majority of those disabled children are children of color. You know, disproportionate suspensions, disproportionate expulsions, etc. Under the laws pursuant to which Disability Rights Maryland operates, which are federal laws, they are given a wide array of rights in order to advocate for and protect the rights of citizens with disabilities within the jurisdiction in which they operate. And pursuant to those statutes, they made requests to the Prince George's County Department of Education seeking records that would allow them to illuminate the reports that they were getting and to find out more about the merits of some of what they were being told. And the PG County Public Schools, for whatever reason, decided not to cooperate with the document requests and basically stonewalled DRM. And we were approached about representing DRM as counsel in a declaratory judgment action in federal court in Greenbelt about the school system's obligation to produce the records. And we ultimately prevailed on summary judgment in that matter. And the school board produced records which made it clear, among other things, that they had vastly understated the degree to which these problems were occurring in their school system. Long story short, DRM approached the Law Firm Antiracism Alliance through the Summer Associate Project exchange to see if they could get some help with actually going behind the records that had been produced to conduct interviews with parents of some of the children that had been adversely affected. Of course, since we had done the case that led to the production of the records, we were eager to also help out in that regard. And one of our summer associates, a former teacher who was very, very interested in the issues anyway, basically spent a significant portion of her summer conducting interviews with parents and families to illuminate some of the problems that they had heard about, to put them in a better position to take action.
Thank you, Ted. A really great project and really just an extension of all the amazing work that you guys are doing at your firm. But again, that LFAA playing that connecting role to Disability Rights Maryland and helping expand their pro bono circle, I think is a real benefit to both at DRM, to Wiley, but of course to our pro bono clients. That's the main goal. So really excited to hear about that example. We have a little bit of time for Q&A. I will just look in the chat if anybody has any questions, or if you would like to raise your hand. Happy to have you ask any questions. While folks are doing that, I'll just remind that you can get involved with LFA in a lot of different ways. If you are a firm that's not currently an alliance firm, then please make sure to reach out to Guerby to get signed up. It's very easy. It's basically reading through our principles and agreeing to them and signing up a form to get put up on our website. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can benefit from joining the Alliance, but of course, having access to all these projects, working groups, convenings, etc., If you are currently at an alliance firm and not yet super engaged, I think the best way to get involved is through our working groups. And so again, you can reach out to Guerby or look at our website and to look through ways to get connected to the different topic areas that are there. And if you're a legal services organization representative, then I think the working groups, the bulletin board, many ways to submit projects there, the Summer Associate Exchange, and of course, participating in our convenings as well. So I see one hand raised. Natasha, feel free to ask your question. I think Natasha's on mute, and I'm not sure if she's able to unmute. So.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yes, so similar to Disability Rights Maryland, I currently work at Disability Rights DC, and also run into access or records request issues. And one of the things that I've been thinking about and trying to see if this is a possibility is more of like standby representation or long-term representation that's not necessarily specific to, or there's not necessarily a specific issue, but like working with a firm where just knowing that these issues will come up regularly. Is that something that you can, that I'd be able to submit to LFAA and then be paired with, or are these very specific issues that people or the firms want to work with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think, and that was similar to another question in the chat about what kind of projects are kind of suitable for LFAA. I would say that it's a very broad, base of substantive area. And really, I think what you were describing just now, a systemic issue that you're seeing over and over again, ways that we can help work on that, I think is really the core of what those projects are meant to be. And so, while we have done kind of individual representations, we're looking more at the systemic issues. So if you're seeing, access to information over and over again, ways that we can help break through that. If it is taking a few sample cases and then developing them into something, a broader class or something that you can advocate with policymakers or agencies, I think that would be the direction to go in.
And I guess just to clarify that, it would, I guess in my mind, it would kind of be like having, or just having a pro bono firm on retainer for those types of issues. I don't know if that clarifies it.
That would be, and Ted, I don't know if you have more to add here. That would be up to you and the firm once kind of matched. I think our goal is to really connect you with firms that are interested in doing that work. If a firm is interested in kind of ongoing and kind of looking at more and more to see kind of the whole spectrum of issues that are coming up, then that's up to them. But it certainly, it doesn't hurt to start that relationship first. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I see a few other questions here. Yeah, when I'm referring to legal services organization, I do mean the broader sense of public interest organizations. Sorry, I was using shorthand. I think a lot of our work does come through traditional legal services organizations, but we're also partnering with many public interest civil rights organizations that don't necessarily do direct representation. I know recently we connected with the Congressional Black Caucus and NAACP in various states. And so, yeah, that we're connecting with all those different organizations as well. All right. Am I missing any questions? Oh, I think Ted, someone had asked about the case that you had worked on with DRM regarding the school discipline issues. Oh, I think you're on mute, Ted.
Sure. If they send Guerby a request that he can forward to me, I can send them a copy of the decision.
Excellent. Great. Guerby has put his email in the chat many times. He's accustomed to getting many emails for requests for information, but I will also just offer up myself and my fellow board members, Kitty and Ted, and anybody else on the LFAA board. We're at many different firms. We're at different organizations as well. And so if you are interested in getting involved or just want to get more information, just reach out. We're happy to connect you and bring you into this wonderful organization. So again, I just want to thank all my co-panelists, Kitty, Ted, and Guerby, for joining me today. I really want to thank Robin and the Washington Council of Lawyers, Christina, for putting together this racial justice series. I'm really looking forward to the next in this series and hope you'll join me then. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.